Here's our big kid voice today. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Colleen Jameson is going to do our Rotary Minute today and guest introductions. While she's coming up, I'll share with you that our December featured charity is the United Way Christmas Bureau. And Colleen.
Is there a preference which one goes first?
Not at all.
All right.
Your pick.
All right, so I'll start off with, can everybody hear me okay? So I can be louder. All right, I can be louder, I'm telling you. All right, so guest introductions today. We have 4 that I'm introducing. The first one is Allison Crow. She is a veterinarian at the Animal Clinic of North Topeka. She is a guest of Kathleen Marker. Welcome, Allison. Our second guest is also a Crow, Tyler. He is a CPA with Wendling, Nelson, and Johnson, and is also a guest of Kathleen Marker. Welcome, Tyler. Our third guest is Liz Sage. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and she is a member relations manager with the Greater Topeka Partnership, and she is a guest of Rayhan.
Hi, Dave.
And then our final guest is our Rotary Youth Exchange student at Topeka High, Sophie, and she is a guest of Todd Payne. Welcome, Sophie. So, as I was asked to do the Rotary Minute, of course I did. My husband calls me the Google Queen, so I did some Googling to see what I could come up with, because I'm a fairly new member, just went through my orientation this past summer. So I came up with something that I didn't know, but maybe you all do, and maybe this is just news only to me, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. So I found out that apparently there is an obligation to share Rotary with the community. And I'm just going to read you what I found. I thought it was interesting. It says, "Are you aware of the responsibility or obligation most Rotarians fail to perform? Is it paying their dues, attending meetings, contributing to the club service fund, or participating in club events and projects? No, none of these. Of all the obligations a person accepts when joining a Rotary club, the one in which most Rotarians fail is sharing Rotary. The policies of Rotary International clearly affirm that every individual Rotarian has an obligation to share Rotary with others and to help extend Rotary through proposing qualified persons for Rotary Club membership. It is estimated that less than 30%, as an attorney, you know, I kind of got to source that statistic. I don't know where that came from, but it was from some Rotary website, so, you know, so you have to take it at face value. It is estimated that less than 30% of the members of most Rotary clubs have ever made the effort to propose a new member. Thus, in every club, there are many Rotarians who readily accept the pleasures of being a Rotarian without ever sharing that privilege with another individual. I really did not come here to shame you today. I'm sorry about that. The Rotary policy on club membership states, in order for a Rotary club to be fully relevant to its community and responsive to the needs of those in the community, it is important and necessary that the club include in its membership all fully qualified prospective members located within its territory. One merely has to glance through, and then next it says the yellow pages. And for those of you that don't know, my law clients are telecommunications companies in the state, mainly small rural independent phone companies. We don't have much, and I think we all know, we don't have much in way of yellow pages anymore, but it says yellow pages of Google, of the local telephone directory, to realize that most clubs have not invited qualified members of all businesses and professions into Rotary. Only a Rotarian may propose a customer, neighbor, client, supplier, executive, relative, business associate, professional, or other qualified person to join a Rotary club. Have you accepted your obligation to share Rotary? The procedures are very simple, and everyone must know at least one person who should belong.
So for a few quick announcements tonight, we have a club social beginning at 5 o'clock at Happy Bassett Brewery. If you haven't been there before, their beers are fantastic. Topeka Pizza is going to be providing cheap pizzas, and there'll be some great boneless wings as well. So plenty of good food and drink. 5 to 7 p.m. That's right off of 29th and Wanamaker, just west on 29th Street from Wanamaker. If you're interested in giving the Rotary Minute and guest introductions, or pushing our membership drive, thanks Colleen, please get in touch with Linda. We also have to announce the slate of officers for the foundation. That slate is Joan Wagner, Carol Wheeler, and Bob Clausen. And I'll open the floor for nominations. Hearing none, I'll take a motion to close the floor.
So moved.
Second? Awesome, thank you. Closed, and next week we'll read the slate as well, and then we'll be voting on those on the 20th when the foundation presents their report and we have our holiday party. Dues need to be in current by December 28th so the club can pay Rotary International Club dues on January 1st, please. And year-end contributions to Rotary International Foundation and or the Topeka Foundation need to be in by December 28th. You can pay by check or credit card with Linda. And with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce Larry, who will be introducing our speaker today. Thank you.
You need help?
Yeah.
No, I think I can make it. Thank you, President Mark. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to introduce my other special guest today. He is John Gooch, who is from the Lee Summit Club over in Missouri. John, if you would stand, please. Hi, John. John and I were district governors at the same time, going back to 2006 and 2007. And he and his wife, Beth, and Lois and I have maintained a close friendship through the years, and it's a privilege for me to have John here today as my guest. My other guest is also our speaker today, and I have a couple of things to say about him. His name is Carl Chinery, and Carl is, you may remember back in September, I announced that we had received a challenge from the Lee Summit Rotary Club, a challenge to see which club could recruit and retain the most members in this Rotary year. And Carl is the individual who issued that challenge on behalf of his club. So he's here today, and I understand one of the reasons why he's here is to throw in the towel, because he doesn't think his club is going to be able to compete with ours. Is that right, Carl? He'll elaborate when he gets up. But in any event, it's my privilege to introduce Carl and to tell you a couple things about him before I ask him to come up. Carl is, as I say, he's a member of the Lee Summit Rotary Club and has been in private practice of the law since about 1977, 76. He joined Rotary in 1977 and was able to be eventually president of his club and district governor for the district that's over on the Missouri side of the line. He has received many awards in his years as a Rotarian, but especially focused on the programs and activities relating to the eradication of polio. He received the award for polio eradication in 2010. He also was cited for foundation activities, receiving the citation for meritorious service and distinguished service, and also the Service Above Self Award. And these are very, very high caliber awards in Rotary, and he should be congratulated on these. He also participated a number of years ago in a national immunization day in India, and carrying forth his belief in the importance of eradicating polio throughout the world. He has done work as an attorney. He is an attorney. He has done work for over 130 nonprofits in his years as a practicing attorney. There are many awards that he's received and many associations that I could tell you about in the greater Kansas City area and Lee Summit. I won't go through all of those. But most recently, he was honored with the Lee Summit CARES Lifetime Achievement Award and the Nature Trail at Unity World Headquarters in Lee Summit bears his name. Carl has some interesting hobbies and things that he enjoys doing. Excuse me. He enjoys working with wood, and in that connection, he has made several sailboats and canoes. And I know they were works of art, but unfortunately, they did not float, and they currently reside in the bottom of the Lackawanna Lake, where Carl lives. But he has many interests, and he and Jean together have 8 children and 18 grandchildren, and every member of Carl's family is a Paul Harris Fellow. So at this time, well, one other thing I want to mention, since we're talking about membership, during his career in Rotary, Carl has sponsored over 165 new members into Rotary, and he's also been involved in helping to start 3 new clubs. So with that background, let me introduce our special guest today and my good friend, Carl Chinery from Lee Summit, Missouri. Carl.
Thank you for inviting me today, and it was just a real interesting experience trying to find this place and then getting in. They said that before I would be asked to be a speaker at the Topeka Rotary Club, it would be a very cold day, and you know where. And certainly that has come to pass. And so far as the challenge is concerned, I wanted to go today because I wanted to pick up the check in advance. That people ask us why we would challenge the Topeka Rotary Club in membership, and I respond very simply that it's just easy pickings. But and when I came in today, I could see that I was in fact right in that regard. Now, what I like to do is I like to, when I go someplace, I like to make a visual illustration of what I think the geographic area that you live in looks like. So when I came into Topeka, I kind of scouted the map and I looked around and I thought, well, maybe it looked something like this. Now, how many of you think that I can make this whole? Raise your hands. How many of you don't think I can make this whole? You're right, but Mark can. Mark, would you come up and open this up and make it whole, please? While he's coming up, because I can tell it's going to be slow, I wanted to show some pictures of our club and my family. Go ahead. But you didn't have a 35mm projectors. But I wanted to show you the picture. Here's a picture of my family I want you to get. And then our club. Oh, by the way, your club in July 1st had 185 members, and our club had 152 members. I want you to remember that because I don't want you to cheat at the end of the year as far as the membership count. Go ahead. What are you waiting for? Well, what I'd like to do today is go through Rotary by the numbers. I think it's good sometimes for us to refresh ourselves on what we have in terms of an organization and what the numbers mean. So, and this is a participative event. When I come with a number, if you know what it means, just yell out what you think it means. And I brought a PowerPoint today so I can illustrate exactly. 1905. Year founded Rotary, and who was it who did it? Paul Harris. And?
3 other guys.
Yeah. The whole world hates us. Yeah. 1905, Sylvester Sheely, Hiram Shorey, and Gus Fear. can you think of an organization with names like that that might be successful? 1906. When Rotary was founded, it was founded on the principle of networking, friendship, but service was not part of the Rotary founding. Service came in 1906, and what was the first service project? A comfort station in downtown Chicago, and it's quite controversial. In fact, over the years, Rotary has done a lot of things very controversial that have actually been successful. But it was controversial because there were no toilets in downtown Chicago except in the back of department stores. So people would have to go through the department store, do their thing, and then come back out, and by that process, see what was involved, see what the store was selling, and hopefully buy something. But there was also a competing service project that may have been the first one, and that was donating a horse to a preacher in Wisconsin who was an itinerant preacher and had lost his horse. 1,200,106.
Number of members.
Number of members worldwide in Rotary, which makes us the biggest service club in the world. The Lions would dispute that, but they include in their numbers their youth programs. So indeed, we are the biggest. 42 to 34. This is an interesting one.
Army beats Navy on Saturday.
10 years ago, the average size of Rotary Club was 42 members. Today, the average size of Rotary Club is 34 members. We have the same number of members, we just have many more clubs, and they're a lot smaller. 35,706. Number of clubs worldwide. 538.
Number of districts.
Larry knows this one, Larry.
Number of districts.
Number of districts worldwide. I thought I'd give you a chance to learn know something. 220.
Country for an quarter mile.
What's that? Actually, it's the number of countries and territories that Rotary. Oh, is that what you said? 1932.
Foundation.
No. It was when the four-way test was created. So let's say the four-way test together. Is it the truth? Is it fair?
All concerned will build and better friendships.
And it will be beneficial
to all concerned.
4. That is the four-way test. 5. Avenues of service. What are the avenues of service? Community, I heard. Club. International.
Vocational.
Vocational, the lost one. And the 5th one, the latest one? Youth. Youth services. 1. And this one has definitely been lost, the classification system. You know, Rotary was built on networking, and it still is important to us. Early on, you could only have one person from a particular occupation. That's been, of course, changed in recent years. 1917.
You heard the foundation contribution?
The foundation was created, that's right. And what club was instrumental in doing that?
Downtown Kansas City.
Club 13, Kansas City. 26.50. $26.50, which was the amount that started the foundation. And that came from the proceeds left over from the International Convention that year. Very generous. Now we come to some big numbers. 1,000. Anybody, 1,000. Anybody else? Anybody else? It's a start.
Paul Harris.
Paul Harris.
It's a start. You know, if we just gave $1,000 to a charity and stopped, that charity would fold. So if you gave $1,000 to your church this year and didn't give anything more, it would fold. Right, Mark? So $1,000 is a Paul Harris Fellowship, but it's just a start. 3, this one's kind of tough. It's Rotary's mission. We have 3 things in our mission: education, humanitarian, and peace. 1948. That was when the Ambassadorial Scholarship was created, which became the biggest private scholarship fund in the world. 85-92. We are listed in the charitable in the Chronicle of Philanthropy as 85th largest, best-run charities in the world. There are only 400 charities that are even listed in that. And one of the reasons is the use of our money. For example, programs employ 92% of our funds. Fundraising is only 6%, and administration is 2%. 6-2. Do you recognize this? Avenues of service. There are 6 avenues of service, and I'll go through them, but the other one is 2. Anything that we do in these service projects must be sustainable and measurable. So let's look at what we've done in the last year. We've used $217 million from our foundation. That's the amount of money that we've spent. And that's broken down $28,500,000 in district grants. In other words, that's money that comes back to you all and that you use. $86 million for global grants, that's worldwide. And then in the 6 avenues of service, $35 million roughly for disease prevention, $18 million for water and sanitation, $11 million for basic education and literacy, and $10 million for economic and community development. Maternal and child health, $7,500,000. Peace and conflict resolution, $3.5 million. But then let's talk about health and talk about polio. When we started in 1979 on polio, and some of you may know the story, about going to the Philippines, and this was also something that was very controversial for Rotary, because Rotary had never, before 1979, participated in a worldwide project. All of our projects were local. That year, there was some leftover vaccine in a pharmaceutical company in Canada. And that vaccine was donated to Rotary, and 6 million children in the Philippines were vaccinated. And it wiped out polio. So that's what really started us on our road. In 1985, what happened?
Women.
1985, our goal was to get $120 million for the eradication of polio. Nobody knew how much it would take. We didn't get $120 million. We got $247 million. And then in 2002, the second campaign was for $80 million. We didn't get $80 million. We got $129 million. Rotary doesn't fail. To date, and these numbers are about 6 months old. To date, Rotary has contributed $1.625 billion, plus millions and millions of man hours. But just think about that number. That is more money than I made last year.
By $1.
Now, we're not the only ones who contribute the money to eradicate polio. You are familiar with the Gates Foundation, and they came in, we were the spearhead, and they came in and they've contributed now close to $4 billion. But worldwide, more than $17 billion has been contributed. Most of the money comes from different countries, but we still are the spearhead. We are still the spearhead to date. 3.0. That's the cost for vaccinating, giving the vaccine to one child. And that includes the vaccine, of course, which is about 60 cents, transportation, vaccination, stipends, carriers, chalk, dye, all that it takes to get to people to give them the vaccine. 2.6 billion. That's the number of children worldwide who have received the vaccine as a result of our efforts. 17.4 million is the number of cases that hopefully we've saved. People who have not contracted polio as a result of our efforts. So, let's go back in time. Let's go back in time and talk about what happened in history. Let's talk about Wytheville, Virginia. The summer of 1950 was bad for Wytheville, Virginia. Motorists sped through town with their windows rolled up, bandanas covering their faces. The swimming pools closed and then the movie theater. The draft board closed, even with the war exploding in Korea. Polio had struck. Almost 200 people came down with crippling cases of polio in this close-knit community of 5,500. 23 residents died. In Wythe County, 1950 became known as the summer without children. Swings hung listlessly in empty playgrounds as children entertained themselves with board games, reading, and listening to radio stations. The fear of contagion was so great that mothers baked their newspapers before allowing anyone to read. No one knew where polio came from or how it spread. We now know polio spreads through contact with infected phlegm or feces. But back then, rumors ran rampant. People around the nation began weighing in with possible causes. The water supply, soil quality, dairy products, flies, mosquitoes, and even butterflies took the blame. One fellow from a neighboring county suggested the plague struck Wytheville as punishments for its ABC liquor store. Businesses remained open, even with few customers. About the only ones busy were doctors who worked nearly round the clock and the 2 funeral homes who turned their hearses into ambulances. Some trips carried so many patient passengers that drivers would lay themselves crosswise. In 1954, just think of that, a very short period of time. Polio has been around with us for over thousands of years. In 1954, Jonas Salk developed a polio vaccine. Then in 1963, Albert Sabin developed an oral vaccine. In 2 years, there were only 65 cases of polio in the nation, and none since 1977. So let's go back a little bit further. When I was appointed Polio Plus chairman in 1989, it was suggested it might be appropriate to give a personal recollection of what polio has actually meant in the lives of those experiencing it. We've been lucky in the United States to have developed the vaccine and be polio-free since 1977, as you heard. But our memories fade over time, and we forget what a devastating effect a serious medical problem can have on our lives and those around us. How many of you can remember the swimming pools being closed in your communities? I was driving down the road in Kansas City one day, and Walt Bodine, who was a popular talk show host, had a pediatrician who had just retired after 50 years of medicine, and he asked the pediatrician, what has changed the most in your years of practice? And without hesitation, the pediatrician says, we no longer have the long wards of polio victims in our hospitals in the summer. Stories make events come alive. So let us mentally transport ourselves back to 1942 and enter the home and life of one family. The home belongs to a couple named George and Artis Chinery and their 5 young boys, the oldest George, age 9, Bill 7, Richard 5, Larry 4, and Carl, age 1. Life is good for this family of 7. They have moved to the area 2 years earlier, and George, the father, has been promoted to 1/3 owner of a regionally important manufacturing company in Kansas City. To get right into the picture, I want to read a letter written by the mother, my mother, when she was 89 years old. This is not some mythical story. It is a story about me and my family, a typical family from the heart of America. Dear Carl, this is very hard for me, but you asked me and just maybe it will help someone else. It must have been August 7th, 1942, when Bill came in and announced he had poliomyelitis. I didn't know where you'd heard of such, but I said, if you have poliomyelitis, you go straight up to bed and stay there, and he did. He really did feel bad. We did the usual things to care of a sick person. He stayed in bed, and at least a couple of days, and then George became ill. I called Dr. Eldridge, our pediatrician, and he came several times, but didn't give the illness a name until the night of August 11th. George couldn't swallow his medication. It came back up through his nose. I called the doctor again, and he came right over. Dad was on the road selling. I don't remember who stayed with the others, but Dr. Eldridge took George and me to Old General Hospital. They took George, but wouldn't let me stay at all. No other hospitals in Kansas City would accept us. I sputtered, but they wouldn't even let me go with George. I went home and called Dad. He stowed at home immediately, drove all night, and went to the hospital about 4 a.m., but they wouldn't let him in either. He came home, and at about 7 a.m., the hospital called us and said George was dying, to come immediately, which we did. When we arrived, George was already gone. He was tied to the bed, feet at each corner of the bed, hands over his head, and fastened at each corner, stripped naked. We stayed in his room as long as they would let us, and of course, Dad had to make arrangements, which he did. I firmly believe George probably would have passed away anyway, as he had bulbar polio, the most virulent strain, and probably choked on his own juices. However, I will always believe the treatment he received at the hospital killed him just as much as the disease. I believe he was frightened to death and will always think so. By that time, Richard, Larry, and Carl had also become sick. And when I got home from the hospital, Richard was much worse, and we rushed him to the hospital. When we marched in, I informed them I was staying. I had lost one child, and I was staying, no matter what. Well, I did. I don't remember how long, but Dad and I took turns. So Richard always had one of us there. One of his dad's aunts had come to help us and stayed with Bill, Larry, and Carl. Carl was an infant and stayed in his crib much of the time. An intern was watching Richard and doing a pretty good job. Dad sent someone to get me to go to the funeral home to see George, but I wasn't able to go to the funeral at all. When I got back to the hospital, Richard wasn't doing well. And in the night, during the intern's coffee break, I saw Richard's skin sink into his chest. All I could see were bones covered with skin drawn tight. I ran as fast as I could down the hall, calling the intern. He joined me and we went back to Richard, and this man picked Richard up and plunked him into an iron lung. He didn't even get ready. However, he didn't fight it, but breathed along with it. His lungs had collapsed. The radio stations throughout Kansas City put out a call for anyone who had had polio to please go to the hospital and give blood to save this little boy's life. One young man or boy answered and gave his blood. We never did see the boy or have any idea who he was. He had walked miles to help someone he had never heard of before. I am most grateful to this unknown person. Richard was whiter than this paper and failing. The machine was breathing for him, but when he started giving the boy's blood, it was like a perfect miracle. His skin gradually started turning the most beautiful pink anyone has ever seen, and he started coming back. I don't remember how long we were at the hospital, but they treated us much better. When we went home, we had to start the kidney treatments. There was one nurse at Old Children's Mercy Hospital who would give us the treatments if Dad would go after her and take her back 3 times a week. Since it was wartime, gasoline was rationed and we didn't have enough gas stamps. But people we had never heard of, and some we knew quite well, gave us the stamps so we could get this nurse. We had to have 100% wool blankets to tear into strips and put in boiling water, run through a tight wringer and place on each child for so many minutes, then off for so many minutes, then on, etc. Dad put a hot plate in an upstairs bathroom to boil the water. He put an old wringer over the tub with the 100% wool strips handy. Bill had done better, was on his way to recovery. But Richard, Larry, and Carl were the sick ones now. Dad hired nurses to help during the day, and my dear mother drove from Concord, California to help, plus a very loyal girl who helped me for several years, who had become a WAC in the Army. She told them her family needed her and they can't let her come home. We were one busy Army ourselves. When the boys were well enough, we had to start therapy, compliments of the Marching Dimes. I took my children and another lady in leg braces and her little boy 3 times a week. Richard has one leg a little shorter than the other. He walked kind of crippled for a long time. Carl's chest never filled out. Bill had many problems. And of course, we have one little boy, Angel, in heaven. People came from everywhere to give us hope and offer to help, but they couldn't come in the house. We were quarantined. Post-polio syndrome is rampant now. Fatigue is the main symptom. You can well imagine how this, my family, was completely turned by the devastating illness called polio, with 5 children contracting the disease at the same time, To help handle the medical problems, the second son was sent to Independence, Missouri, to be cared for by grandparents until the illness took its course with all the remaining children. The help of many people brought through and made possible survival of the 4 remaining sons. However, the family was also isolated from many close contacts by people who were simply afraid, and rightfully so, of the disease, afraid of how it contracted and the possibility that it would be spread. Think how helpless we are when polio strikes. There is no cure. It can only be prevented. It took 60 years for my mother to write this letter and talk about polio. My dad never did. That's the legacy of polio. Think about people helping people by peace through service, by engaging Rotary, changing lives both in the past and present. Family doctors, caregivers, neighbors, gas stamps, sharing rides. My peace through service in the eradication process started with the letter. Mom's letter has been posted online, printed in several handbooks, and been used by a number of other speakers. Her writing is another rivulet in the Rotary River. I encourage you to find your tool to engage Rotary and change lives in whatever area of focus your passion may be. In Rotary, we don't divide our work by nation, culture, or language. It doesn't matter what is printed in your passport. What matters is that you believe in service above self. Your problems are my problems, and I care enough to help you. The Rotary River trickles along, picking up speed and strength. Soon other tiny rivulets surface and feed into the river. The river grows in intensity until today it pervades all of Rotary. Robert Frost, in his poem Stopping by Woods, ended it by saying, "The woods are lovely, dark, and deep. But I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep." Isn't that Rotary? We've made some mighty tall promises. We've got miles to go before we keep them. Thank you for being Rotarians.
Carl, I just dropped your PowerPoint. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time. That was absolutely phenomenal. We have a tradition here of asking our speaker to sign the book plate in a book that we then donate to Ross Elementary Grade School. It's a local school. This is Groovy Joe, Ice Cream and Dinosaurs. And in your honor, we'd like to ask you to sign that, and in your honor, we'll donate that to the local grade school.
I was hoping for a flat screen TV.
Folks, next time you see Yana Ross, please thank her. She set up a lot of this last night by herself. Also, thanks to T-Pack and Larry. We were short of some bottled water, and they came up with some right as lunch was happening, so thank you very much. Larry also mentioned to me that Ron Smith, a longtime volunteer at T-Pack, passed away while he was driving his wife to a medical appointment in Kansas City recently, and I know several other people in the club have lost loved ones, and this time of year that's hard, especially. Never easy, but also hard this time of year, so please keep people in mind as you're interacting with them. Next week's meeting is at the Capitol Plaza Emerald Ballroom. The program is the Attorney General's Office, Human Trafficking, and Jennifer Montgomery from that office will be speaking. If you haven't heard her speak before, she's incredible. And then December 20th, we would love for all of you and everybody in the club to make a special effort to make it. We think that's going to be at the Capitol Plaza Emerald Ballroom. Watch emails as this may change with their construction to the Shawnee Room and the Manor Conference Center right there. But that's the Topeka Rotary Foundation special presentations for this year, and also a wonderful holiday party that Joan and her team are putting together for all of us and our enjoyment. And I know we said the four-way test earlier, but let's say our own version of that. And with that, we'll close. Please stand and share that with me. The things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And is it fun? Thank you all. Have a great week.